Department, and we are going to share with you some data and analysis for mid-first semester. So you're almost through the first semester, and so we have some different data to look at this point in the year. And so we just want to kind of remind you of some of the data sources that you have. There's really nothing new at this point in the year. It's kind of a review of some pieces that you've already looked at, but please feel free to ask questions, or if you want to drop a question in the chat, please let us know how we can best support you. So this particular document is data analysis throughout the year, and this is on our assessment, research, and program evaluation website. This document is basically a calendar for assessments during the year, what you have available to you, and there's links for every one of these documents to a data protocol that shows you what to do with that data. So today we're going to dig into CogAT a little bit and talk about the CogAT profiles as well as the ability performance chart. But we'll also talk a little bit about your unit assessments and your PMAs as well, because that's another data source you have at this point in the year. And then for elementary, we'll look at reading records as well. So those are our big data sources that we're going to go into today. So let's first start with CogAT. First of all, CogAT is the Cognitive Abilities Test. It's always good to know what the acronym stands for in case you're ever quizzed on that. This assessment measures a student's cognitive ability in a way that's not measured by other assessments. Most of the tests we give are about achievement and not ability. It gets to cognition by asking questions in a novel and unfamiliar way. So your kids will see things tested in ways that they might not have seen before. They may look a little bit different. The purpose of CogAT, why we give CogAT in our district, is to learn how our kids learn best. CogAT gives us information about how each student learns best, and we feel like that's valuable information to have on all kids, so that's why we administer CogAT to all of our students. Now, one of the scores that we get from CogAT is the CogAT profile. We also get norms for percentile rank, and we get age norms, and we get standard age scores, but we're going to focus today on the profile. So every CogAT profile has two parts. The first part is a number from 1 to 9, and that tells you the student's overall cognitive ability or level. The second part is the pattern, and that pattern tells you how the three scores of verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative, how they relate to each other, and that gives you information about how the student learns best. So this is the bell curve. Now, CogAT is a standardized assessment, and like most standardized assessments, it conforms to a bell curve. This bell curve is broken down into 9 parts called stanines. And so you'll see that at the bottom there, the stanines. So a student whose CogAT profile starts with a number 1 has a very low cognitive ability. Now, that's not a permanent designation, but that just means that right now, how that student learns, how they're able to solve problems, that they have a very low cognitive ability. And that will obviously impact their achievement and how well they do in things in school. A student who has a 2 or 3 at the front of their CogAT profile has a below average cognitive ability. So all of those students, your 1s, your 2s, your 3s, it would not be a big surprise for you to see low achievement scores, low MAP scores, STAR scores, classroom assessments, those kinds of things, because those students have a below average cognitive ability. It doesn't mean they can't improve, because they certainly can. That's the reason why we give CogAT every other year. We expect to see it grow and change over time. In the middle of the bell curve, the biggest part, are students who have an average cognitive ability. Those are your 4s, your 5s, and your 6s. Now, statistically, 2/3 of the population have an average CogAT profile. Most of the students on all of your campuses have an average CogAT profile. So the students that are in 4, 5, and 6, because they have an average cognitive ability, they should be successful on schoolwork, on their achievement tests. They have what it takes to be successful. If they aren't successful, if they do struggle with achievement, we want to make sure we understand why. Students that are in the 7 and 8 range, that their CogAT profile starts with a 7 or 8, have an above average cognitive ability, and then 9 is very high. So your 7, 8, and 9 students should be doing very well in their achievement. Those should not just be students with average work in class. Those should be students who are doing above average, that are doing very well academically. Now, that first part, the stay 9, is in that first column there. Those are your stay 9 numbers. The next part of a CogAT profile is the pattern. So if a student's CogAT profile has an A, that means all 3 of their scores are roughly at the same level. They're verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative. That means that student will learn equally well no matter how the information is presented to them. They don't really have a preference for how they learn best. On the other hand, a student who's a pattern B has one score that's above the others 2 or below. So that student is telling you how they learn best, or perhaps a way they really don't learn best. So if it's a pattern B, it'll always tell you out to the side. For example, if it's a verbal strength, it'll be a V plus, or a nonverbal weakness, it'll be an N minus. That way you know how they learn best or how they don't learn best. A student who's a pattern C has 2 scores that show a relative strength and a weakness. So they have a contrast in their scores. And then again, it will tell you out to the side which one is their strength and which one is their weakness. So that positive or that strength number will tell you how they learn best, and the negative or the weakness will tell you how they don't learn best. And then finally, pattern E is when one score is extremely different from the others. Now, the average score on CogAT is 100. So knowing that 24 points is an extreme difference, but yet we have students on every campus in every grade level with pattern E's. So keep an eye out for those because that will be very telling in how that student learns best. And then you see at the bottom with the key that V is for verbal, N is for nonverbal, and Q is for quantitative. And obviously a plus sign is for positive, is for a strength, and minus is a weakness. So one of the places that you can find a student's CogAT score in EduGence is in student assessment history. So here we have an example of a student who has 2 different CogAT scores. So in EduGence, MR is most recent, and so that is the score at the top. So this student's most recent CogAT is a 7B. So that 7B tells you that they have an above average CogAT score. That 7 is above average. B tells you they have one score that's above the other 2. And in this case, it's a quantitative strength. So this student learns best through the quantitative domain. When you are live in EduGence, those blue profiles are clickable, and you can click on that profile to take you to this page from Riverside Publishing. So this page gives you a full narrative of that student based on their particular CogAT profile that tells you how they learn best, some instructional suggestions for them. There's a section on working memory. There's a section on grouping students. This CogAT profile, this full narrative, is very helpful in learning more about the student and how they learn best, but no one expects you to read it for every one of your kids. My suggestion is to look at it for those students who have an unexpected score, either MAP or CogAT, a student whose achievement does not match their ability, or a student who maybe just is a mystery to you, that they're inconsistent, you're not sure what they're capable of, you're not sure exactly what to do for them. You might want to read the profile to see if that gives you some additional information. So why do we give CogAT in our district? We want to measure a student's cognition, and we use it to make sure that we have a balanced view of students by looking at that nonverbal domain in particular. The nonverbal domain, according to CogAT, is the purest form of cognitive ability because it's absent of any language or prior instruction. So particularly for our English language learners, that nonverbal piece gives us a much better indicator of what their true abilities are. The 3 primary uses of CogAT are to guide our efforts to adapt instruction to the needs and abilities of students, so we can use it to find out how they learn best, to provide a measurement of cognitive development. So that's the piece that we use it for with PACE testing, is to have a quantitative measure of cognitive development. And then finally, to identify students who have a discrepancy between their achievement and their ability, that there's a difference between what we think they should be able to do and what they're doing in the classroom. And those are the ones we want to dig into because those are the ones that are most telling about that particular student. So like I said, CogAT stands for Cognitive Abilities Test and has 3 sections: verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative. We do test it in the odd years, 1, 3, 5, and 7, because the publishers tell us that this data is good for 2 years. So for example, if you're a 4th grade teacher, you can still use the 3rd grade CogAT data because that data is still reliable and valid for your students. That way we can minimize testing, but have the data available to make those instructional decisions. So here's how we get to student assessment history and EdGens. Up at the top, next to your name, you have that icon that looks like a waffle, or the apps icon. You can click on that and then go to reports. From here, under reports, you're going to scroll down about halfway down the page, and you'll see a header that says Plano Assessments. Under Plano Assessments, you're going to look for student assessment history. It's the first option in the orange box. Depending on your level of access to EdGens, you may have the option to be able to see it by grade or by teacher. And if you do, you can choose to see it whichever way. If you're looking at it by teacher, you can choose to see one class period at a time, or you can choose to group your students together and see all of them together. When you're looking at those CogAT scores in student assessment history, you will have the P column for profile, V for verbal, N for nonverbal, Q for quantitative, and C for composite. Now, a student has to have a score in all 3 sections, verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative, in order to get a profile score. So if you have a student who's missing the profile, it's because they did not answer enough questions in at least one of the other sections in order to get a score. Keep in mind that in verbal, nonverbal, quantitative, and composite, that the average there is 100. So especially when you're looking at a student who doesn't have a complete profile, it may be helpful to think about that in terms of relative where they are, is that 100 is average. So if they're significantly above 100 and they're missing one score, then that's not a big concern. It just lets you know that they didn't finish enough questions in that section. So here's an example of a student. So this student is a 6th grader. And this student has a CogAT profile of a 7E with a V minus. So the 7 tells you this is an above average cognitive ability student. The E tells you this student has an extreme strength or weakness. In this case, it's a weakness and it's in the verbal domain. So think about for a moment what you think this student's MAP scores and STAR scores would look like, knowing their cognitive ability. So this, sorry for the overlap there. So this is the student STAR scores. The student is approaches in reading, math masters, science approaches. Now, considering this student is a 7, is an above average cognitive ability student, I would expect their reading and their science to be higher than approaches. Yes, they are a V negative, so they don't learn best through the verbal domain. But I would still expect that a student who has this high of a cognitive ability would be doing a little bit better in reading and science. So I would want to find out a little bit more about what is holding this student back in those subject areas. Here's their MAP score, and we notice the same pattern. Reading is at approaches and math is at masters. So again, I'm seeing a consistent pattern with this particular student of them struggling with the language heavy concepts of reading and science, even though we have an above average cognitive ability. There could be lots of reasons why that's happening. I would just want to make sure I understand the reasons why and that we're addressing those. Here's another student example. So in this case, I'm going to show you STAR and MAP first. So this is a student who's been very consistent in getting to the approaches level. So we've been approaches in reading and math on STAR for 2 years now. Our MAP scores right now are at approaches for both math and reading. So knowing this about the student, think about what kind of a CogAT score you would expect for this student to have. This is what the CogAT score actually is. So this student is a 5C So he has a contrast with a V negative and an N plus. So this student has an average cognitive ability. He has a weakness in the verbal domain and a strength in the nonverbal domain. So this student has an average cognitive ability and should be doing fine academically. However, the fact that they are a verbal weakness may be impacting their achievement. So let's talk more about those different kinds of learning and how they would impact a student's learning. A student who has a verbal strength, a V plus student, learns best through reading, writing, listening, speaking. They prefer to write or talk about new learning. They tend to have good memory skills. These are students who can listen and follow directions, listen to you speak and understand that very well. They can read a text and understand it very well. They learn best through the ways we typically teach in the classroom. On the other hand, a student who's a V negative tends to underperform in school because they do not learn best through reading, writing, listening, speaking. They do not learn best through listening to a teacher teach or reading something independently. So if a student is V negative, we need to think about different ways that we can present the information for those students. What about a student who has a quantitative strength? Quantitative strength or Q plus kids understand abstract concepts like symbols. They may learn computer skills easier. They tend to be good at coding. These students excel at rule-based knowledge. For example, math facts, algorithms, chemistry formulas, grammar rules, spelling rules, rules and processes that are consistent and we do it the same way every time. So for these students, we can capitalize on their ability to automatize skills by trying to automatize as much as we can so we can free up some working memory space for them to solve more difficult tasks. On the other hand, a Q negative student tends to struggle with those rule-based knowledge pieces. They need to more understand why. Rather than just performing an algorithm the same way every time, they need to understand why they have to take the 1 and move it to the tens place, or why they're going to pull the decimal down. So once they understand the why of things, they will learn it much easier. They need to understand that why before they can automatize things. A student with a non-verbal strength tends to excel at drawing or visual arts. They prefer more visual modes of thinking. Nonverbal strength students need hands-on. They need models. They need pictures, visuals, videos. For these students, we need to control the rate at which we present information verbally. We need to talk less and use less complicated sentence structure and vocabulary when explaining things to them. They need less words. They need more visuals, more hands-on. These students may prefer to take their notes with drawing pictures or making concept maps rather than writing out words in order for them to learn best. And then a student with a pattern A has no significant differences among all the scores for the 3 batteries. A student who's a pattern A has the only thing that's important about them is their overall level of cognitive ability, not which one they learn best, because all 3 are about the same. So for these students, you want to try different strategies with them in all the different domains to see which one works best for different topics, because they don't really have a strength to leverage. In some ways, I feel like the pattern A kids are the hardest because they don't have that strength that you can leverage. Now, as I said, one of the things we look at with CogAT is that difference between ability and achievement. And so one of the reports that we look at to see a difference is the ability performance chart in EduGence. So in EduGence, right under where it has student assessment history, we see ability performance chart. So that's the report we're going to go to next. So this report has CogAT scores on the horizontal axis and then MAP scores on the vertical axis. It has reading up here for star and MAP reading down here. It defaults to showing you reading achievement, which is compared to CogAT verbal, but you can switch to math achievement compared to CogAT quantitative, or science, which is compared to CogAT nonverbal. When you're looking at this visual, the center section right around the 100, this box, those are the students who have an average cognitive ability. Below average is the box right below that, and then very low. And then you have above average to the right and very high. Each dot represents a student, and their dot is placed where their CogAT and their MAP scores intersect each other. Now, what we expect to see is we expect to see consistent performance across multiple assessments. We expect that students who have a high CogAT also have a high MAP score, and students who have a lower MAP score also have a lower CogAT score. We see that visually by a diagonal line of dots going from the bottom left to the top right. So in this visual, what we're looking for are dots that fall out of the diagonal, that don't seem to fit the pattern. So when you see a dot that falls out of that pattern, that's a student that you want to take a look at. And when you're live in EduGence, you can hover your mouse over it and it will show you who the student is. So that is a student that has a discrepancy between their achievement and their ability, and we want to make sure we know why. So this is a good report to help us figure out where those discrepancies may lie between ability and achievement. Yes. So let me go through the subjects and the COGATs again. And thank you for asking. So reading, map, and STAR go with COGAT verbal. Math, map, and STAR go with COGAT quantitative. And then science, STAR, and map go with COGAT nonverbal. So that way you can see how those cognitive ability pieces, how they match with achievement. Okay. Thank you guys for asking questions. That helps. And if you have other questions, please let me know. All right, so now from here, we're going to jump into reading records. So this is just a K-5 piece, so middle school, hang on for a second. We'll get back to you in a bit. But for those of you in elementary and K-5, teachers do a reading record at the beginning of the year, first grade through fifth grade. Kindergarten doesn't do their first reading record until middle of the year unless they already have readers. So at the beginning of the year, we produce a report from the assessment department that is basically a summary of where your students started the year in their reading record. And that's what this report looks like. Now, teachers, you can get a copy of this report by asking your principals because this is in the campus data folder. This is not something that is emailed out to everybody. It just sits in the campus data folder and the principals can share it with whomever they would like. So when you're reading this report, you see all the reading levels in the first column from pre-A all the way to Z. And then you see the grades from kindergarten all the way through fifth grade. The white boxes indicate what is on level at this point in the year. So for example, first grade on level at the beginning of the year is level D. So in this example, we have 8 students who are at level D, which is 11% of the students. The students that are in this peach or pink color, those are the students who came into the grade level with a reading record that is below grade level. So you can see we've got 18 students at level A, 8 at level B, and 15 at level C. So those are our kids who are coming in below grade level. And then in green, those are the students who are coming in above grade level. So this is your baseline at the beginning of the year. This is where you're starting from. From here, you want to think about how much does a student need to grow to stay on level at the middle of the year. So in first grade, students have to grow 6 levels over the course of an entire year to stay on grade level. So at middle of the year, they have to be able to at least grow 3 levels. So these kids at a level D will need to go up 3 levels to stay on grade level by January. These students that are in the pink color or the peach color, those students are coming in lower than grade level. So they need to grow more than 3 levels by January because they need to get closer to being on grade level. So for those students, we want to monitor them more frequently than just waiting until January to do the next reading record. Because these students really need to have already gone up at least one, maybe even two levels between when this reading record was taken and today in November. So we need to monitor those kids in the peach range more frequently because we need to see more growth faster for them so they can make more than a year's growth in a year's time and get closer to being on grade level. So this report will show you for your grade level how many students you have at each level at the beginning of the year, so you know which students you need to monitor more closely and be able to track and make sure that they're making the progress they need to stay on grade level or to move closer to grade level. Now we're going to talk a little bit about district assessments. So district assessments include our unit assessments in grades 3, 4, and 5, and also our PMAs or progress monitoring assessments in middle school and high school. So on our website, we have a section on our website for Edugents, and that is where you will find guides for how to access your reports for these modules, how to read the data, how to find the data, and what to do with that data. Best practices for our district assessments are to review the results, both by student to see how each kid did, but also by item to see how did students perform and how did they react to my teaching in any individual TEK. You also want to make a plan for reteaching. What are you going to do to address those particular standards that students are still struggling with? Evaluate how students responded to your instruction. And then also use that as feedback to improve your instructional practice. That's question 5 on that PLC process framework that we never get to, which is improving your instructional competence, is being able to figure out where can I improve as a teacher, and our district assessments can give you some valuable feedback to help you with that. We recommend that you access your reports for your district tests, your PMAs, or your unit assessments through the teacher dashboard. How you access the teacher dashboard depends on your level of access and Edugents. So if you have teacher-only access, if you do not have full campus access and Edugents, you can only see your class, then on the black sidebar, you're going to look for the option that says district assessment, not the one that says district assessment with new in parentheses. You're going to look for the one that just says district assessment, and that will take you to the teacher dashboard. If you do have full campus access, you're going to go to reports, and then you're going to look under district assessments and find teacher dashboard. So it just depends on what your level of access and Edugents is, but it will take you to the teacher dashboard. As you can see up here at the top, there are a lot of different options, a lot of different reports that you could look at for your PMAs, for your unit tests. There's really only 2 that we feel like you need. You're welcome to look at any of the ones that you see here, especially if you have a particular goal about something that you want to focus in on. But the 2 that we recommend for you, one of them is the error analysis, and that's what you see here. So the error analysis shows each student by name. It shows how long they took to take the test. Now that piece is being worked on right now. It was not functioning correctly, but they're working on that duration piece right now to make sure that it's accurate. So you'll know how long a student took to take the test. You'll see the raw score and the percent correct. And then you'll see what the student put for each of the answer choices. If it is a technology enhanced item, like a drag and drop or an inline choice, you may see a point value like a 0 or 1 to indicate how many points they got for that particular item. Items that are highlighted in pink show you questions the student got wrong. Those that are in white, those are the ones that the student got correct. Up here at the top, you see the percent correct for your class. So you can see which questions were particularly hard for your class, particularly difficult. You see what the correct answers were. And then you can see what reporting category it came from and the TEK up here at the top. Now, this particular report has a little hidden Easter egg, and that is this icon next to each student's name. It looks like a bulleted list. It's in blue, so it's clickable. And if you click that for each student, up at the top, you'll choose district assessment, and then you'll choose your content area. But this is going to take every PMA or unit test that the student takes all year, and it will aggregate them together by TEK. So up at the top, you'll be able to see over time, this will change to show you which TEKs the student has mastered and which ones they're still struggling with. So the ones that are in green are the ones the student has mastered. Then you'll see kind of a lighter green, then you'll see a light pink, and then you'll see a red for the ones that students are particularly struggling with. As you get closer to STAR at the end of the year, this may be a helpful piece in helping you to figure out what TEKs do you need to review for students as we're getting ready for that assessment at the end of the year. The other report in our district assessments that we recommend you to look at is the item analysis. The item analysis is question by question, so this is not by student, but by item. It again shows you the reporting category and the TEK that was tested. The columns in yellow show how you as a teacher, how your class performed, the percent correct and percent for each answer choice for your class. The columns in purple are how the entire grade level on your campus did. And the part that is in orange is how the district did. This is a great way to have a PLC conversation with your team about performance on a particular assessment, because you can have those conversations about questions that maybe my class performed very well on a certain question and maybe another class did not. And we want to have a conversation about how I taught this versus how someone else did. Or but maybe my students particularly struggled with an item and I'm not sure why they struggled with that item, and I can ask my colleagues how their students did and see if they taught it in a different way. It's also helpful to see those district averages because I want to see if these items were a struggle just for my class or my grade level, or were they a struggle for the whole district? Was it an item that was designed to be difficult, like a STAR item that separates your meets from your master's kids? Or was it an item that what just a lot of kids really struggle with that particular item? How the district did impacts how I'm going to interpret that information. If you find an item that you want to drill down into more carefully, there's another hidden Easter egg on this page, and it's the icon right in front of the number. It's a bar graph. And if you click on that bar graph, it'll show you what the question was from the test, what the answer choices were. You'll see the percent of students who chose each of the different answer choices. And then below that, you'll see all the students in your class and what answer choices they picked. Now, it's very helpful to know on multiple choice assessments that the distractors or the wrong answers that are included in an assessment are included very specifically to be common mistakes that kids might make. They're not just random wrong answers. So if I know that there's a group of students who picked A as the wrong answer versus a student who picked D as the wrong answer, my reteach for those two groups of students needs to be different. Because they picked different wrong answers, they have different errors, different misconceptions that I need to address. So it's important to know not only which kids missed the question, but what wrong answer they picked so that I make sure my reteach matches the assessment and the kinds of mistakes that kids are making on that test. That makes sure that our reteach is more effective. So today we've kind of gone through a couple of different pieces. Again, nothing was really new at this time of year. We went through CogAT a little bit. We went through looking at your CogAT scores and your ability performance chart, reading records from the beginning of the year, and then also looking at your unit assessments or your PMAs. Does anyone have any questions about any of the data pieces for this time of year? The presentation is being recorded and we will post it on our assessment website so you can go back and listen to it. Or if you want your team to listen to it, or if you want your staff to listen to it, we will post it on our website that you guys can access it. To get credit for today, my email's up there on the screen. If you'll just send me an email that you were present today for today's webinar, we'll make sure that you get your professional learning credit for today. Tamara's keeping attendance, but just to make sure that we didn't miss anybody,